Playoff week is here. The play-in games are tonight, but we can't let the regular season fly by without taking the time to soak it up. So we will do that. We'll get you ready for the playoffs one day at a time here. And Max McCauley is here to help us do all of that. That's what's going on today's episode of Locked On Suns.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a contributor at Suns.com and Dime Magazine, and a credentialed media member covering this Suns team for the past 5 seasons. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen today and every day. One step closer to the playoffs, everybody. It would do us a big, big help if you could go hit the subscribe button wherever you're listening, but most importantly on YouTube. I'm trying to get to 1,500 subscribers before game 1 on Sunday. I think we can do it, but you're going to have to tell every Suns fan in your life to hit that button as well to help us out. Let's not waste another moment. Max McCauley is here. He is the one-time and occasionally still of the 7 Seconds or Less podcast with David Nash. Max, I want to just get your feelings right now as we capture this moment in time heading into another Suns playoff run. And I also want to get your pick for tonight's game because it's Clippers-Wolves. That'll have a big impact on who the Suns play. So tell the people how happy you are and then tell people who they should be worried about facing.
Well, first of all, Brendon, thank you so much for having me on at this auspicious time for the Phoenix Suns. It really is exciting. And
it is.
That's how I'm feeling, man. I'm just excited. I think, you and I were talking a little bit before we started about how we're ready for this, I think. Once it was clear we were the 1 seed and we were just kind of coasting, it was sort of like, just don't get hurt. We just wanted to go into the playoffs and have our full team. And we do. We have our full team. So it's really exciting. I think every Suns fan is over the moon about this team. And we're just waiting to see how it goes in the, the season that matters. For tonight's game, I actually already placed a small wager on the Los Angeles Clippers.
So did I. So did I.
Did you? On the Clippers as well?
Yeah.
I
Yeah, I agree. The line's really narrow, but it's the Clippers. Like even if they weren't like playing well with guys coming back, I also just feel like they're more experienced.
Yeah.
I guess
we
last
year in the Western Conference Finals last year. I think Suns fans, if anybody, respect them to some extent, right?
Oh yeah. It's weird though. I guess I'm saying that, and then last season we saw the Grizzlies go out and win one of those games. So, I guess it truly is. It is random to an extent, but I have the Clippers as well, and I think that's what Suns fans probably are rooting for. So I don't think it's a bad thing to feel confident about because it means that the Suns can avoid the more. I don't even know difficult. I would say it's more difficult. It's more just a nightmare, like pain in the butt. Yeah. And so I don't
want to play against Patrick Beverley ever, really.
Well, if the Wolves lose though, then they might have to play Patrick Beverley.
That's true. I'm trying to. Yeah, like both sides of this aren't good necessarily.
Yeah.
But I think what you want is the Pelicans or the Spurs to win on Friday. But that's obviously not guaranteed.
Yes. That would be ideal. Although the Spurs might. I saw somebody in my YouTube comments a while back that was like, don't like overestimate or underestimate the Spurs. Suns fans know how bad that can be. And I literally responded and I was like, they don't have a top half of the NBA defense or offense. Like we don't need to worry. Like I get the history. I get
Tim Duncan's a coach now. He's not playing, so I'm not that concerned about it.
Exactly. I get the scars, but we can all collectively move on. The Spurs are not going to beat anybody. That would be ideal, but we'll see what happens, guys. You've heard it here from me. You've heard it from Max. I think the Clippers will win. We'll be here every step of the way to break it down, though. But as I said, we have the regular season we have only a couple days to really look back on it, and that's what we're going to do. So Max and I each prepared our top 3 regular season moments from this past year, a franchise best season, of course. Today's show, guys, before we get started, brought to you by PrizePicks. Check out PrizePicks.com. Use the promo code NBA or go to your app store and download the PrizePicks app today. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. All right, I will give you the floor, Max. You are the guest, of course. So let's go from 3 to 1 because that's saving the best for last here. So your number 3 your number 3 regular season moment from the 2021-2022 Phoenix Suns season.
Okay, my number 3 moment happened not too long ago, about a month ago, during the Chris Paul injury. It was when Devin Booker was just coming back from somehow being in COVID protocols again. I'm still not quite sure how that happened, but
bad luck. Yeah,
bad luck, exactly. But he just, he was just about, it was in that range when he was going to come back or not. And we were all kind of thinking, well, even if he's ready to come back, he won't come back for the Miami Heat game on the road, the end of a road trip. There's no reason for him to come back for this game. He does come back, and the Suns proceed to maybe have the best performance of the entire season. It's certainly up there. I'd say in particular the third quarter of that game. The defense they played in that quarter was unlike anything they played the rest of the season, in my opinion. They absolutely came in there saying, this is the one seed in the East. This is a team that's had our number a little bit. We want to lay the smackdown on them, and they did. And that's probably, to me, the highest level they've reached in the season. That's kind of why it gave me it's top 3 for me.
I love that one because it was not on my list. I completely overlooked it. I believe Monty Williams said after that game it was one of the best defensive performances he's ever seen a team play, and he's been for a year or two, to say the least. So, that was a very good one. The funny thing about it to me is you said the questions about Book heading in. I still think he shouldn't have played in the game. Like, I mean, it doesn't matter. It wasn't like I was worried about him getting hurt or anything. Like, shouldn't is an exaggeration, but like he had no reason to go across the country to play one game, and he did it anyway.
And it kind of set the theme for the whole second half of the season, right? Or at least the last couple of months with the Suns. They weren't playing by our waiting for the playoffs, making sure everything's safety caution rules. They were like, they wanted to play basketball. They wanted to win.
Yeah, they absolutely did. And 90 points they held the Heat to. They held them to, I believe, like 35. I should have trusted my memory. 35 points in the second half. Unreal. I mean, to do that to another one seed and a team, I'm sure partially that was originating from a team that laid it on them in the last time that they had played each other. So, this actually worked out well because my number 3 is not on court. It was the only one of the 3 that was a little bit more silly, I guess, but I actually mean it with all. I'm not just doing it for content's sake. My number 3 moment of the Phoenix Suns season is the very first time. I don't know if it was actually the first time or just the first time anybody noticed, but the first time that McHale, Campaign, and DA danced to Nevada pregame with the floor sweeper. And the funniest part, I know that they respect their opponents, but there's going to be some playoff games when that happens because now the DJ knows and he plays it every single game, whether they want him to or not. There's going to be some playoff game where it pisses somebody off that they're screwing around pregame, like the game is like already in hand and they're already just celebrating basically. But I love it. We all love it.
I love that one because it encapsulates.
Awesome.
It's a nice kind of like way to summarize just kind of the way this team feels about each other, the camaraderie they have, because it's a real thing. There's a lot of good teams that don't like each other. It happens a lot in the history of all sports. There's a lot of champions who don't like each other, but this team, if they win, knock on wood, like they love each other. It's going to be one of those teams.
I can't even explain. Like I just moved into a new apartment. The volume that song will be blaring if things go the right way in about mid to late June. I need to prepare my wife for the possibility of an eviction because that's happening for sure. I think it's going to be. It'll be exactly. I mean, look, if everybody tells all their friends to listen to this podcast, then what my deal will be. I made some extra money doing the show because the Suns made a big run, and I'll cover the whatever the fees are and we'll find a new place, but it's worth it. It's worth it.
It all evens out.
It all evens out. All right, let's do number 2 and number 1 after a quick break. First, I got another quick word from today's sponsor, PrizePicks. We love PrizePicks on the Locked On Podcast Network because we're all diehard NBA fans and we're all kind of bored with the usual daily fantasy thing. You set your lineup. Especially with the NBA these days, it can be a nightmare knowing who is even going to play, who the matchups are going to be, whatever it is, a full-time job to even know all of that stuff. But what you do at PrizePicks is you set it based on overs and unders. So obviously, nobody who isn't playing is even going to be listed. But you also don't have to know the intricacies of every little thing. All you have to do is really look at the trends. So here's what you do. You pick 2 to 5 players and an over or an under on their projections. You can win up to 10 times your bid on any entry. Again, it's just you versus the projection. So no pool, no head-to-head matchups, nothing like that. It's just you. And then whether you get that over or under correct, entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. PrizePicks offers safe and fast withdrawals. And they have either the website, prizepicks.com, or their award-winning PrizePicks mobile app. And the best part is, in my opinion, you can do cross-sport entries. So it doesn't just offer the NBA. They have options in college basketball, college football when those seasons are going on. Maybe you double dip with the MLB right now, which is just starting back up. You can even get into the fight game and put a bid on that. So over, let's say Devin Booker points. You say under Diamondbacks total runs scored because they didn't bother putting any offensive players on the roster this year. And then you set it and forget it. Watch as the money comes in. For limited time, PrizePicks has an exclusive no-brainer offer for listeners. You get $50 free when you sign up using the promo code NBA. That's right, an exclusive offer for those who sign up today using the code NBA if and when a player in your first PrizePicks entry scores a single point, which of course they will. That's code NBA to get $50 free when a player in your first PrizePicks entry scores a single point. PrizePicks, daily fantasy made easy. Today's show also brought to you by BetOnline.net. BetOnline is your number one source for all sports betting stats and info and analysis, podcasts. They have everything. I'm pulling up the latest odds. They send us these emails, and they had some fun ones for the playoffs. Let's see here. Well, the Clippers, we talked about that already. The Clippers are 2.5-point underdogs. You have NBA series lines. Maybe you're feeling good about the Raptors with Matisse Thybulle not playing and the Sixers looking like they're on the verge of imploding. That's plus 160. BetOnline, your continued source for all sports wagering info, guys, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more across the entire sports landscape. Head to the website today. That's betonline.net, or use their mobile app to learn more about the latest trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Max, your number 2 moment of the 2021-22 Suns season.
My number 2 is taking us back a little bit, back to late November, I believe. It was the second night of a back-to-back. They had played the Knicks the first night of the back-to-back, and that was a fun game too. Booker was awesome. It was a lot of good times. The next game, though, we thought there's really no chance we're going to compete in this game. It's at the Nets on the second back-to-back night. It's at the end of a road trip, I believe. And we just absolutely smashed them, like absolutely crushed them. It was the reason why it's on my list. You know, we crushed a lot of teams this season, and I've enjoyed that. But the reason why this one sticks out in particular is because it's the first time I really thought, okay, this team is not last year's team. This team is far better. It was at the moment when I was like, this is a team that, you know, I really think it might win the title. Like, I feel pretty good about it at that moment, I think, for the first time.
I love that one. Another one that I did not have. Was that the best Mikal Bridges defensive performance of the season?
He was ridiculous in that game, man. What was it? 6 steals in the first half? Something like that?
Seven steals. Oh, yeah. I think 6 in the first half. You're right. I think that's what it was. 7 total. And James Harden was 4 of 15 from the field, did not make a three-pointer, and had 7 turnovers. So, I mean, like in Oscar land or whatever with movies, actors have to submit the scene that they should be considered for. That would be the one Mikal Bridges would send in my opinion. He was unbelievable.
Absolutely. You know, I'm just a real quick side note. I'm feeling better about his chances to win Defensive Player of the Year a little bit, but especially first team all defense. Seems like a lot of the early ballots that are out have that going.
Vindicated. I don't still really know what happened last season.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Defensive Player of the Year, it's going to be a weird final ballot. It feels like it'll be something where like 6 guys get a considerable number of points, or maybe 4 or 5 guys get an actual number of votes, and then it's just going to be somebody who happens to have a handful more than the rest. It doesn't seem like there's a consensus whatsoever. But Mikal is he's popping up on ballots from people who actually have a vote that are writing about it, so it's a good sign. My number 2 is I combined 2. But they did happen about the span of about a month. And it was recent, post All-Star break, beating the Lakers both of the times that they did. Once, the first time was by, I think, 39 points or 29 points, either way. And it was after Anthony Davis decided to get a little smart with his comments pregame, try to relitigate and rehash the first round series last year, try to make excuses a little bit, and then you get the classic Devin Booker laughing meme post game when he's asked if they had heard about the comments pregame, which was all but assured when they went out and spanked the Lakers. And then the next one was just a couple of weeks ago, beating the Lakers on April 5th. That was less than a week ago. Feels longer than that, to get to 63 wins. So, of course, that had to be on there. I don't have a moment because they were both blowout wins, but that feels doubly good whenever it's the Lakers, and especially when there's a little more on the table. And those were both really special.
Yeah, they were both. You don't need, I don't think, specific moments from the game because they were both just kind of moments. The first one being because we blew them out so badly, and as you pointed out, they had talked a little bit of trash for that, and Booker decided to take objection to it. And then the more recent one, obviously, went to the franchise record wins. So they both kind of carried their own moments. I like those two.
I thought about the D'Angelo Russell, screaming at D'Angelo Russell, I don't have any friends, but I think that was like kind of I can't decide how corny that actually was because they're absolutely still friends. So I couldn't fully land on that one. I think that was Book getting a little bit ahead of himself, but it's all right. You're number one.
He's prone to do that sometimes. My number one, actually, good segue is about Mr. Devin Booker. And it's my soft one, of course. It's the moment after the Lakers game where he gives the jersey to Al McCoy, recognizes Al McCoy. I think it's been said, and I think it's obviously a little bit of a soft thing, but I think it really was the moment where Devin Booker became the best son. I think it's for he showed that he embraces the entire franchise. He got us to our best, highest point in the regular season. Obviously, when the finals last year, it's as far as we've ever gone. I just think that Devin Booker's it's weird because it's not an on-court moment or anything like that. It's just sort of clicked right then. I think for me and a lot of other Suns fans that this is the guy.
Yeah, very, very special that and obviously, I mean, it goes without saying, but he knew he was going to do that. Like he had to put some thought ahead of time. He didn't just go give Al McCoy a high five or something. Like he knew this record's coming. I want to do this. It's special. And I mean, it's like one of those things with how Book handles his business, with how sort of like he's not quiet, but he doesn't publicize his every step all the time. So this might sound ridiculous, but part of me when that happened was kind of like, yeah, they must be, they must know each other pretty, like they've talked, like, but you don't ever put those two people within the Suns together at least I don't in my head. So it was like, just to kind of see, and like, it's the revelation of like, wow, that was, the culmination of something between them, not just for the Suns franchise. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you said on something there about how just kind of the way Booker behaves, his demeanor. What does Chris Paul call him? The oldest 24-year-old last year whatever he called him, most mature. He just is. He's not normal for an NBA star who's his age. It's just he's not a normal character, and it's really good for us because he's better in pretty much every single way.
Number one for me, not really a moment, although I guess you could pick the final win of the 18-game win streak, but the streak as a whole. You were talking about that Nets game where you really felt like, okay, something's happening. That was during the win streak. It was one of the final wins in the streak, and it's a very good one to identify on your part, but I think that's when we all realize like this is not going to be a second year lull. This is not going to be a step back. That Vegas over under was a complete and absolute joke. All that stuff just really solidified. You had Frank Kaminsky scoring 31 points out of nowhere and DA missing like the first half of it almost.
How long ago was that feel when Frank was doing that? That feels like it was 3 seasons ago.
It really does. And that was like one of his last games, which is a disappointment for him. All right, let's rapid fire off a few other ones. I don't know if you had any honorable mentions here, but mine were, I don't actually think these would be like 4, 5, and 6 for me. I'm sure there's some games that I could pinpoint, but these were just some fun moments that I did not want to let go by without returning to them. James Jones having a disabled player exception that none of us knew he had.
That was
just
fun.
At the deadline, just pulling Aaron Holiday out of a hat and being like, ta-da, I applied for this thing. And we don't talk to media, so nobody knew. Yeah. Bismack Biyombo going off against his former teams, both Charlotte on the road and Toronto at home.
Yep.
Those were quietly like some of the most randomly fun games, even though they were both really tight, uncomfortably tight games.
They were.
That was a blast. Biyombo doing what he did this year was fun.
Very unexpected.
To say the least. My last one was not a specific moment, but the dog pound cam before games, just adding that into the experience. I don't know if you've been to a game this year, Max, but for anybody who has, it's about 18 minutes pregame. You lock focus on that screen, and you're bound to get something ridiculous happening.
Love it. All right, I got to mention a couple because one, I can't believe neither of us mentioned, and it's part of the 18-game streak. It's the Warriors win, the first Warriors win, where Booker goes out in the first half. That I'm sure most people would probably have that. Another one that real quick I just want to mention in that same streak was a Minnesota game that maybe only I remember this, but we were on the road in Minnesota. We were playing horribly, and Booker just like decides he's going to will us to a win. And just starts scoring every single point in the third quarter, and just like starts making every single play in the fourth quarter, and just like we had no business winning the game. We won like 99-96. It was an awful game, but he's mucked us through it, and I just love that from him. And then the last one, I actually was out of the country for this and didn't watch it, but I feel like I want to mention because everyone else talked about it, and I watched the highlights and loved it. The Cam Johnson game before he went out against the Knicks.
Oh yeah, the Knicks game.
That one's got to be mentioned.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That should have been on there. We are messed up for not including that one. And then the like power or like potency of doing that and then like reinforcing how hurt you were by missing like 3 weeks after that. It's like, no, he was hurt. Like he wasn't just like sore.
Seriously.
Like the dude got hurt. Yeah.
Yep. 100%.
That's a great one. I want to set the stage for the next segment, reminding people, okay, so we just listed like 10 things there. They were fun. They were special, whatever. So I tweeted this on June 23rd of last season, which I don't even remember where we were in the run at that point. But just to let people know how much things get amped up in the playoffs, I tweeted on June 23rd last year, rank these moments from the Locked On Suns account. Chris Paul comes back to close game 1 against the Lakers. Book goes for 47 in game 6 against LA. Chris Paul destroys the Nuggets. Suns in 4 as a moment. The airport celebration. Book's 40-point triple-double. And the Valley-oop. So this must have been like middle of the conference finals that I tweeted this. And to be fair, there weren't a lot of great moments after that, so we don't have to talk about that. But like that's 7 in the first 2.5 rounds. Yeah. And we just got to 10. And a bunch of them were silly from the regular season. So we're in for a lot more. Max, are you ready to do our Suns playoff stock watch?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. Before that, today's show, guys, brought to you by Rock Auto. With so many makes, models, trim packages, keeping up with what year your car is, there's a lot to keep track of, and it's impossible to walk into a chain auto parts store or, heaven forbid, a dealership and get what you need. You're going to be locked into the brand that they happen to carry. You're going to be locked in, worst of all, to the price that they want to charge you. If you have a phone in your pocket or a computer at home, you have access to rockauto.com, and you can avoid that entire process. Rock Auto is a family business. They've been serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. They've been doing it online for over 20 years, most importantly. They keep prices reliably low, and they have a ton to choose from. All you got to do, type in the car that you have, scroll down to the part that you need, click purchase, and it's at your door within days. So go to rockauto.com right now, see all the parts available for your car or truck, and write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, and all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. All right, we're bridging the gap between the regular season, which we just celebrated a little bit, and the playoffs with a Suns playoff stock watch. So here's how we're doing it, Max. Here's how we're doing it, all of you listening at home. Obviously, I was thinking a confidence index because that's what I did this week last season. But I figured, Max, we would both agree. We would all just say that we were incredibly confident in everybody. I don't really think there's anybody where we're like, no, I think they're going to play like crap. They just won 64 games. Everybody's playing pretty well. Nobody's hurt. So instead, what we're going to do, this stock watch, is compared to when we were heading into the playoffs last season. So
interesting.
For instance, Cam Johnson, who we're not going to do because I think because of what I'm about to say, we would feel much better about. He was hurt. I don't think he played in game 1 of the first round last year. So
he did play in game 1, but it was kind of surprising, and he played pretty well. Better than he played in like weeks. It was weird. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for remembering for me. But that's an example. So we're not going to do Cam Johnson because that's an obvious one for that reason. But that's how we'll do this. And we're just going to go starting guard through starting center. We're not going to do too much of the bench, but we have one bench player to get to. So that's what we'll do. Chris Paul is where we will start, and I will give you the floor. So stock watch compared to heading into the playoffs last year, how are you feeling?
It's a really good question. I think better, but not hugely better. I think one thing that helps a lot is that we got to see the playoffs, right? And he had some really great playoff moments. As you mentioned, smoking the Nuggets happened after your litany of moments, but obviously game 6 against the Clippers, maybe the best game, competing with Booker's 47 that the Suns player played in the playoffs last season. So I think that having that in your back pocket helps. The one thing that gives you a little bit of pause, I wish he were shooting the 3 better. His three-point shot's been off all season, in particular since he's been back. He's just not been shooting it very well. But I mean, overall, it's hard to be too worried about Chris Paul, and I think I'd be slightly above where I was last year.
Do you think this might sound ridiculous? It probably is, but like the switch flipping to becoming more of a scorer, do you just think that's still there?
Yes,
I think he scored 2 points per game less this year. So I mean, you look at the numbers and it's like, he's not scoring as much. But I think I agree with you. He can just go right back to that.
He also wasn't scoring as much in the regular season last year before the playoffs, right? And then the playoffs, again, like what is it, 46 against the Clippers? He never did anything close to that in the regular season.
Yeah,
I think he can absolutely go to that mid-range jump shot over and over and over when he wants to. He just didn't need to.
Yeah, I had down for him written down as my note that was going to be my stock watch, but I think it's because of exactly kind of, I agree that he will be able to flip that switch. I'm not worried about that, but I guess coming off of last regular season, it felt like he was a constant threat to do that. And he was scoring late in games more consistently. And it speaks to the rest of the roster more so than anything else. But this year, he didn't really do that. Like we didn't even see like a 30-point game from Chris Paul very often. Like there was that game last year down the stretch, relatively speaking. I don't know if it was before or after the All-Star break. Pelicans game, do you remember where the Suns were weirdly down in the fourth quarter on the road in New Orleans last regular season? And Chris Paul just like decided to win the game. I don't think we've had quite as many of those where he as a scorer has done that. But the way that you just put it and talking through it now, I'm like, I have absolutely no reason to doubt that he can do that. But if I'm putting myself in the mindset of where I was last year, maybe I'm a little bit more down. But
I think you're making a good point. I think it's a really good point.
Yeah,
he has not been doing that in the regular season. I think, especially since he's gotten back from the injury. Like in the first half, he's been a ghost in almost every single first half. I think it's just taking it easy. I mean, is there a small sliver of a chance that there's something missing? Sure. I mean, of course there is. You don't know until you see it. But overall, I think just because I just saw what he did last year just gave me so much. And, because here's the thing. I haven't watched every game of Chris Paul's career. And you sort of buy into the narratives a little bit. Oh, this guy's going to choke a little bit, blah, blah, blah. I didn't see. I mean, he got hurt and he had problems because he was hurt, but he certainly didn't choke for us. In fact, he, again, may have had our biggest moment in the whole playoffs.
Yeah. I mean, you could say he choked in the finals, but I don't subscribe to that. I think he was hurt. Yeah, he was hurt.
Also, people
can't dribble the ball.
And it hurts, but the end of game 5, he was the reason why we had a chance at the end of the game. He got us back into it.
Totally fair. We can breeze through the next two. I think we will agree here. Devin Booker and Mikal Bridges, I had way up with 4 A's each. I think.
I don't know. Devin Booker, I just don't know if that guy's any good.
I've heard that he's a good stats, bad team type of guy. I'm not sure if he's up for the task here. I don't know. No, I think, like you said about Chris Paul a little bit, but especially for some of these younger guys, we saw him do it, right? Booker, the only hesitation any of us would have had last year was, what is it going to look like? We never knew. Now we know, and he's been better this regular season. Bridges, I think, actually a little bit of a different case because he's just a demonstrably better player. I think he's he's improved in every capacity of his game this year. And that, I mean, it's like, I think there's these tiny little things where we can forget how big of a difference from this time last year to this time this year. And Bridges' improvement is like probably the top of that list. Like he's just like 15% better, 10-15% better as a player. That's huge.
And what's so good about that one, the Mikal Bridges one in particular, is because, you know, part of this factoring in how we are now versus how we were back then is how the playoffs went last year. But for Bridges didn't have a bad playoffs by any means, but he kind of was quiet a lot of the time. I'm really excited to see what he's going to look like with these new offensive skills he has. Because this thing now where he goes into the lane and takes these pull-up jump shots that go in like a lot, that was not a thing last year. It was a little bit of a thing. He did like once every few games. Now he's doing that 3 or 4 times a game. And a lot of times in the clutch, like when it matters. And I think I'm really excited to see if that translates. I can't see why it wouldn't. It's kind of an unblockable shot if he has the confidence to get in there. So yeah, I totally with you. I think in fact, he's probably the one who's I'm the most high on compared to last time at this point.
Yeah, I feel that for sure. Here's an interesting one. Jay Crowder. I think I said up, but it's close. And the reason that I say that is because last year, I think a lot of us were waiting for the other shoe to drop, so to speak, in terms of when is the cold streak coming, right?
Yeah.
He's been a streaky guy. He was coming off the bubble where he was out of his mind as a shooter. And still, if you go and look back, like the past 2 Sun seasons are still relatively speaking kind of outliers. Like he had one really nice shooting season in Boston. He had the bubble with the Heat. And then these 2 Sun seasons have been like basically league average. He was below league average for a lot of his time. But all that said, I guess to me, I just think the Suns can withstand it. I don't think it like go a little bit cold, and I just don't think that's really going to make a big dent on their team because they have Cam Johnson. They don't really rely on Jay Crowder as like a guy to provide points for them. So I just, whether even he might hit that or not, I just don't think it's going to matter. So that's why I said up.
Yeah, you touched on my point there that I was going to make about part of it is you're right. We're not totally going to be as concerned if he's bad because now we have Cam Johnson as a built-in replacement who's probably better than him anyway. And hopefully we'll be playing well enough to close games. I'd love to see that. I think, you know, at our highest peak, the Suns have him as the 4. That's the highest version of this team. So hopefully he can play well enough to justify that. But yeah, just focusing on Crowder himself. Totally agree. I think it's pretty close. He's a very steady guy. Other than shooting waxes and wanes, but everything else is always the same basically with him. The toughness and everything. I think maybe the only reason I'd say slightly higher is because we got to see the toughness thing manifest in the playoffs last year. You should have saw it happen for your team, and I think that gives me the confidence they'll do it again.
And the emotional thing too, right? I mean, you bring up a good point there, like the toughness and, you know, the salsa and all that stuff. But it's like you're talking about Patrick Beverley when we were giving our thoughts on the play-in game on Tuesday night here. And it's like, you got to match fire with fire on some of that stuff. And like, I think Book is at another level with it. I think Bridges has a little bit of swagger to him now but it's like Crowder is that guy for this team. And we saw how much that can matter, but we didn't do Cam because I think, like I said, we would both just be so much higher, but I think you can't ignore either though. Like there were times when Suns fans were like, you know, pulling their hair out, wanting him to play more. Do you think that that's kind of on the table? Like, do you think Monty will be comfortable going straight to Cam closing games? Because we didn't really see it in the regular season. And like, I don't know how that locker room is. I would like to believe it's fine, but to jump to like, okay, now it's the playoffs and we're changing up who's closing games. Like that is a leap to make, but how soon do you think we might see that?
I don't think it'll be happening while we are comfortable, basically is what I'd say. So while, you know, the first round, I don't expect it to happen because I'm hopeful that it won't be a very long series. You know, by the time we get to the Warriors or whoever later on, if, you know, say it's 2-2 and Cam Johnson's on fire and Jay's missing everything, or we're down 2-1 and we're in Golden State and desperately need a win or something like that. If the chips need to be pushed to the table, I don't think Monty will be scared to do it, especially if it's a game where Cam Johnson's playing really well. But I do want to quick touch on your point about Jay Crowder, just sort of him dealing with other team stuff. And I want to touch the Warriors again. In the game against Golden State not that long ago, him and Draymond were at it the whole time. And you want to get in Draymond's head because that is somebody you can get to throw him, get himself kicked out of the game. He absolutely is prone to do that. And Jay Crowder is our best bet at riling him up for sure.
especially by the conference finals, which is when the Suns would play the Warriors at this point. He might be close to that 7 technical foul mark, and we all know that can swing a series and deliver the first title in franchise history. That's just an imaginary situation, of course. It didn't actually happen.
Draymond would never lose his team a series of that magnitude.
Yeah, never would happen. Okay, final member of the starting lineup, DeAndre Ayton. I have down, and that might. So I'll make the case as quickly as I can. Okay. One, I think any of us, it's an unenviable position to be in, to have the contract stuff looming. You're having national voices continue to say he may not even be on this team next year. That sucks. Yep. And whether we think it affects people or not, it does. I think in this case, it would any of us in it. I also think part of me feels like for all the strides that he has made offensively, being a little bit more of a dynamic player, I don't necessarily feel like those things are so ingrained in who he is as a player that they actually will necessarily be there in the playoffs. I feel a lot better about Mikal Bridges adding to his game. That stuff will be able to cross over, to carry over. I don't know if we're going to see DA busting out like a short roll all that often. I just think the playoffs kind of put you back to your bare bones of what you are. And I think some of that extra stuff we've seen maybe doesn't actually show up game to game where he's impacting things at that much of a higher level. Does that make sense? I think we just see the DA we saw in last year's playoffs, which is an incredible, very valuable player. They need him to play at that level, but I don't know if he'll be better, I guess. And then you throw the contract stuff in, and that adds up to a down.
Yeah, so the frame of reference matters a lot for me on this one. So if it's how I felt about Ayton compared to before last playoffs and before these playoffs, to me, it's night and day. I mean, people forget how bad he kind of was before the playoffs started last year, and how much of a revelation he kind of was. So it's hard for me to say he's down from that. But I get your points in terms of where he's been, sort of some of the growth he's shown, especially offensively, and some of the moves he's made. I don't know that I necessarily expect that to happen. And I mean, you're right to point out the contract thing. I mean, my hope is that he hasn't let it affect him so far this season. I don't think I haven't noticed. I mean, maybe you never know. Maybe he'd be averaging 30 points a game if it weren't happening. I don't know for sure, but it doesn't seem like it's affecting him. Yeah. He's definitely saying the right things. He's playing well often enough. I think he's had his best regular season as a Sun so far. So yeah, I think I'm certainly higher on him before then, but I'm with you as far as I don't expect like a star leap out of him or anything like that.
No, that's a great point. And you're totally right. I created the rules and then forgot them. So yes, I think if you compare it, we were coming off of an incredible stretch in the regular season from DA to close the regular season. But of course, like what he was able to do against the Lakers, defensively against Jokic, in game 4 against the Clippers, some of those moments where it was like, this guy is massive. That definitely changed things for us. And I'm probably more my comparison was probably more to like the beginning of this regular season or something. Right. So I think you're definitely right. Last but not least, I will give the floor to you. I think I have started us off on each of these because I can't shut my mouth. So I will give it to you. Cam Payne. He's an interesting one because we all know, by the end of the finals, he was not playing much. He did not become much of a factor. So where are you compared to heading into last year's playoffs and just overall about Payne? Because I think he's a sort of a wild card that people don't talk about a lot.
It's really interesting, especially to try to compare it to before last playoffs. I'm trying to remember how I even felt about him before last year's playoffs.
Yeah, I don't know what I thought about him. Yeah, exactly.
I think we had to have had some sort of skepticism about whether he'd be able to carry it in. So you definitely, using that frame of reference, have to look at what happened in the Western Conference Finals last year and be like, well, we saw him do that. So that's helpful, obviously, for him. I mean, game 2, the Valley Oop kind of overshadowed it, but everyone kind of forgets that Cam Payne scored like 27 points in that game, was our best player in the game by far. That was helpful. And in game 1, he was awesome too. Both times he had to start for Chris, but then we saw after that, you're right, the Milwaukee thing where he really, he gave us a little bit of spark in game 6, but he really didn't play very much other than that. I think if you would have asked me this question 2 months ago, I'd be much more down on him. Obviously, he wasn't playing as well. That's easy to say, but I really liked the way he played without Chris Paul in the lineup. I think he was mostly good for us and kept us going. I think he's been good also, obviously, since Chris Paul's been back. He's been pretty solid. With him, it's all about reading himself in. The more he can play within himself, the better a player he'll be. And I think that he usually does a good job with that, but there are times where his shot selection gets a little out of control. I'm sure it'll happen in the playoffs a little bit, but I think it'll also help him to have the full roster here together so he won't feel compelled to do more than he needs to do. So I guess all that way too much rambling said, I'll say I'm a little higher.
No, it's exactly where I ended up coming down. I said kind of slightly up, but the reason more so than anything else, you pointed to the time that it happened, but the way that I was thinking about it is I think I just trust his playmaking more.
Yeah.
I think that he can lean into being a facilitator. I think he kind of gets how to do that within this offense and not always have his foot on the gas a little bit more. He's played with a little bit more restraint this season. There's been games, obviously, 15 plus assists a couple times. And that Knicks game we were talking about, I think he had 18. So that makes me feel a little bit better that he can still have some value. He can still stay on the floor. He can still keep the defense honest, even if he's not scoring 25. And I don't think we really saw that guy. That game one you talked about in the conference finals, he had 11 and 9, but who else were they going to play?
Right.
He kind of, he had to do that. He only had one turnover. So that was probably one of the only examples in last year's playoffs, but I think he can be that guy pretty consistently throughout this entire run. I think he can lean into that. And I think the other benefit is the Suns have a couple other options now with Shamet and Holiday and, and Booker handling the ball more, which I don't think they were really doing so much last year, to not have to rely on him. But I think I feel a little bit better about him individually. All right. Any parting thoughts here? Any wisdom or joy you want to, we're talking before we're all going to be stressed out of our minds for like 2 months. So I feel like we all just got to let it out. Is there anything you want to tell the people?
Yeah, this is something we were talking a little about before, but I think that's the one thing I'll say, and I'm going to try to do this myself, but it's going to be a stressful, like you said, stressful, joyous. A lot of stuff's going to be going on, but we just got to try to enjoy the ride, no matter how it happens. Like, got to keep the perspective of, hey, 3 years ago, we were talking about 19 wins. We were talking about the franchise that was the joke of the league, and now we're talking about the best team in the league, and they're the giant Vegas favorite now to win the title, and Bill Simmons and Brian Russillo declared that Booker was number one in the finals MVP draft, like without even questioning it.
Yeah.
Devin Booker, the guy who can't win games, is a good team or a bad team, good stats guy. So you just got to bask in it.
For sure. That's it's the only way we're going to get through this, I think, because there'll be some pressure, like we all are feeling. I think it didn't. If we were doing our own sanity stock watch, I think we'd be compared to last year, because this time last year was like, well, let's see what happens. There's nothing against the Lakers, and now it's like 16 to go. You know what I mean? So let's all just have some fun with it. We will be here every step of the way, guys, every single day with you here on Locked On Suns. So subscribe if you have not already. Join the movement. I don't know, that just sounded right coming out of my mouth, but let's have some fun. Let's have some fun the next couple of weeks. I'll be back tomorrow recapping the play-in game. I'll give my thoughts on what the winner looked like, but especially what the loser looked like, because that's the team the Suns may indeed end up playing. So stick here for that. Again, thanks for making Locked On Suns your first listen today and every day. Now go make Locked On NBA your second listen to catch up on everything going on around the league today.